Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Dennis, thank you so much for being with me today, and I'm hoping that you can introduce yourself and share a little bit about your spiritual journey.
Yeah, okay. Well, probably the first thing I need to do in introducing myself is maybe explain why I'm wearing sunglasses. Because I'm not trying to look like Joe Cool hanging out by the Student Union building. I actually have a couple of minor disabilities, and one of them is light sensitivity.
Hmm.
So if I don't want to get splitting headaches after about the first 10 minutes, I have to wear sunglasses for doing Zoom, which I know is a little off-putting, so I just hope folks can bear with me on that. It's just this is much better. I can do that there. I actually have eyes and everything, but this is just way easier on them. It's on my father's side of the family. It runs in the family. My grandmother, who was this interesting old Calvinist lady, had the same thing. And the bathroom light, this was back in the days of one bathroom households.
Mhm.
And the bathroom light was too bright for her at night. So she would go to the bathroom with the door cracked open using the tag of light from the hall.
Hmm.
That, till I got used to it, I was a teenager then, that made for some interesting moments. So I promise if I'm ever near your church using the bathroom, I'll keep the door closed. I will do.
Uh, so maybe you could start with your name and um, have you been UU your whole life, or did you come out of another tradition? Or
Yeah, okay. Well, my name's Dennis McCarty. I do the Gentle Atheist page on Facebook when I remember to. Uh, and I will say I'm a shaggy dog story waiting to happen. So again, you may have to edit. No, I was born into kind of a progressive Christian family. My folks eventually got involved with the Unity School back when it was the Unity School of Christianity. Uh, but see, I was 12. We moved to Salt Lake City, and there was at that time no Unity Church there. And I was really this religious little kid. It was a big deal to me even then. But there was no Unity Church there, so I was unchurched for a while. And being a shy, chubby, non-Mormon kid in a very Mormon city in middle school,
Hmm.
uh, middle schools have been known to get a little bit rough on each other, was an interesting experience to say the least. I got severely bullied, so I got to see the shadow side
right.
of at least that branch of Christianity. And then at the age of 16, in the high school bookstore, I was a junior at West High School in Salt Lake City, I happened across a copy of the Bhagavad Gita that I guess an AP class was reading, and I got it and read it, and it just blew my mind.
Hmm.
The idea that somebody could believe something totally different just as sincerely as I did. And the next thing I knew, I was kind of a happy agnostic, and I just felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I didn't have to make pieces fit together.
Mhm.
That didn't seem to me, having seen the shadow side of at least that branch of Christianity, didn't seem to fit together. But I was happy at the Unity Church. I am not one of the people who's been wounded by Christianity. I didn't consider the kids in my neighborhood that were bullying me from my branch of Christianity. But agnosticism and then later atheism just seemed to work better for me. So, but one thing I emphasize is that's just a belief or a non-belief, and I do come out right out and say that religious belief or non-belief to me has nothing to do with living a religious life. And all we have to do is look at the people around us, and that's what we see. That they may have beliefs all over the map or non-beliefs, but the way they live is something different. So
Couldn't agree more. couldn't agree more. When did you find Unitarian Universalism?
Well, I actually found it about age 20 or 22. My mom had commented that I don't know, the topic of probably some early Unitarian president came up, and she said, "Well, the Unitarians were an interesting bunch. They didn't believe in the virgin birth, and and no, the word I've done a brain dump on the word Easter.
The
The
resurrection, the divinity of
resurrection. There we
Christ.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so my fiance and I decided I decided we'd check out the First Unitarian Church in Salt Lake City, which is over by the University of Utah, where we were attending at the time. And it was a really interesting service. Back in the days before wireless mics, the minister was walking back and forth across the chancel steps, talking about how capital punishment was judicial murder, and he was going to go down to the state prison where an execution was scheduled in the next week, and chain himself to the prison gate, and invited us to come along. And I thought, wow, this is great. And my fiance said, we're not going back there again. And we didn't. We explored one church and another and kind of wound up United Church of Christ Congregationalist for a while. But when we divorced, we were married 16 years. When we were divorced, I made a beeline to First Unitarian Church. And later they became my sponsoring congregation.
That was my next question, was when did you feel a call to, or did you, how did you make the decision to move into the ministry?
I was the last one to know.
Hmm.
I wanted a career as a novelist, and so and unfortunately I went into electrical work, which is a big mistake. I was the last son out of the room when Dad said he wanted to follow one of us to follow him into the trade, and it was just I wasn't cut out for it. No, not after the first 4 years. But I kept writing books in my spare time, and finally got a string of fantasy published by Del Rey. If I'd been planning better, I could have held one up. Uh, but the only thing that's interesting about them now, that was in the 80s, 40 years later, is that they're about this warrior monk, this deeply religious character who talks to gods and things and spirits, a warrior priest, as it were. And but the only thing interesting about it is you look at that book and you think, wow, is this guy a wannabe minister or what? But it would be almost 20 years before I got up the nerve. I was interested, and then I thought, oh man, I don't have that kind of energy, and I put it off and thought about it. And then my writing career got to the point that agents and publishers were not calling me back. And so finally, after long thinking and nothing to lose, and I was single, and my kids were grown and almost out. Uh, uh, I decided to go for it, and I started Meadville Lombard Theological School in 1998.
I graduated from Star King in 98. So
I visited Star King. It was one of the campuses I visited. Chicago had better public transport for that location.
no
Was
joke.
was-
Hiking up that hill, they called it Holy Hill in Berkeley,
yeah, and
was
it was like a zillion miles from the nearest BART
BART
stop.
station.
Uh, it's you can get around much more easily in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that was really the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So so how uh, as you entered into, well, both as a layperson and then as you entered into the ministry, how have you felt supported or nurtured in your spiritual path by Unitarian Universalism and by the congregations that you've walked with or you've
Well,
traveled with.
yeah, Unitarian Universalism is definitely a company of like seekers. I wound up in the choir at First Unitarian Church, and uh, it's not so much that everybody agreed, but it was a community and it created space. And my belief or non-belief, it's kind of a combination of both, certainly evolved over time. But to me, it was a space to evolve. And geez, that's the cool thing, It's but just as one example, the being Unitarian Universalist, right? The choir director was Mormon, and so one Christmas he brought us this Mormon hymn about the Virgin Mary contemplating these things in her heart right after Jesus was born. And my God, it was awful. The music was pretty, but it was just face palmingly bad. And a lot of other churches, it's either throw the hymn out or throw your disagreement out. For me, and he didn't want to throw the hymn out, so I went home and rewrote it. I used their arrangement. I had to match syllables perfectly to use the existing arrangement with new words relating it to the war that was then developing in the Middle East.
Hmm.
And everybody was really happy with it, and it wasn't about my virtuosity or lack thereof. It was about that was a space where you could do a crazy thing like that and people would like it. It was a space where you could take that kind of gamble and it would be okay. In fact, it would be just downright good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What about as a minister? When have you served congregations or were you a community minister? I don't actually know your history.
I was always set out to be a parish minister. I loved doing pastoral care. In fact, I did a full year's residency. I liked it so much. And then slept for a week because you know what CPE is like.
I do.
Uh, but my main strength is as a pulpit speaker. Administration, yeah, not so much. Uh, and I'm still writing. I was always going into parish ministry. I wound up uh, I was the first called minister at the UU congregation of Columbus, Indiana, which is about 40 miles south of Indy. And that's, uh, in fact, I was an intern in Kalamazoo, which was a very humanist congregation. And there was some real tension there, and they'd done some work with it that, of course, the humanist element tended to be older white men and the women who liked them. Well, there were some women leaders too. It wasn't just a guy thing, but it had that vibe to it. Well, and in fact, yeah, that's a long story. I'll try not to get too complicated. It was a very older white male dominated church with a female minister.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you an example of the vibe there. And they were sweet guys in one way. Uh, Jill McAllister was the minister, and she was great. And I learned something about male privilege because I was in my 50s by then. She was 10 years younger than I am and quite petite and attractive. Okay. But certainly able to take care of herself. But I started noticing that if the two of us were talking, I was the intern. If the two of us were talking to somebody that didn't know us both, this was back in 2003, next thing I'd know, they'd be talking to me, ignoring her. And man, that was a demonstration of male privilege there because I was the intern. And I hope I was able to model proper deference to her as the senior minister and listening to the person we needed to be listening to. Not that she needed any help from me, but it was a real lesson for me. So anyway, the sanctuary was very dark, and they had to use lights. And one of the volunteers was an older guy, older than I am, was relamping the light rack above the pulpit, and putting new light bulbs in. And there was one really bright spotlight that focused right on the pulpit. And Jill complained about it a lot because it made it hard for her to see her notes. And I told him, well, while you're at it, why don't you redirect that light a bit? Because she has trouble reading her notes when it's on. And I'll never forget his answer. She said, "Oh yeah, I know. She's told me too, but she's so darn pretty. I want people to be able to see her." And I thought,
Oh,
atheist though I may be, God protect me from thinking so much of someone that I make it impossible for them to do the job I'm paying them to do. Welcome to benevolent sexism in 2003.
wow.
Yeah. Now he wouldn't, yeah, anyway, it was just a sweet guy, but again, face palm.
Yeah.
And actually, that had an effect on me. That's because I was around these kind of, and it had been a very macho congregation. It was led for 20 years by a guy named Roger Greeley. And he was Dana Greeley's cousin and a I mean, just fierce character. My image of Roger, and a bit of a narcissist, was I learned I learned about triangulation and not being triangulated, because he was still sore that he wasn't the minister anymore, even though he'd retired. And so trying to triangulate the intern against the senior minister, say what? Even I could see that coming. So we're sitting in this country club restaurant in Kalamazoo, and Roger's got this U.S. Marine baseball cap with the scrambled eggs, the golden scrambled eggs on the bill. It's a red cap, and he'd ordered lunch for us, and he was eating a roast beef sandwich. He was picking up the pieces of meat and just eating them with his fingers. He was picking them up off the bun and just eating the meat. So here's Roger in this red Marine baseball cap, eating, semi-raw roast beef with his fingers. That's an image. So to me, that was a big piece, I think, worth mentioning, why I do not call myself a humanist. I call myself an atheist. Because to me, humanism, and humanism at the church I went to as well, still kind of smacks of that 60s culture, which is thoughtful and certainly sincere and concerned, but it's still also dominated by attitudes about maleness and whiteness that I'm trying to leave behind, because I know they don't work for everybody if you don't happen to be male and white, particularly. So I just refer to myself as an atheist, and to me, it's a cultural thing that I don't want to be attached to. And I know not everyone who calls themselves a humanist is like Roger Greeley or the guy that was lamping the lights. But that culture has stuck in my head, and that's really, trying to leave that behind.
Interesting. Interesting. I actually, just a bit of an aside, when I candidated here in Moscow, Idaho, one of the sermons that I did was on G words, and one of the G words that I talked about was God. And I used a quote from Clyde Grubbs. Do you know Clyde?
I don't know him personally, but I know who he is. I've got a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, he's amazing. Um, so I used a reading from Clyde that basically says we're all humanists, whether we believe in God or
For
not.
sure. Sure.
whatever our spiritual path, we are all humanists, because, we all believe that religion is a tool to help us be better people. And anyway, that's how I sidestepped the whole argument.
There was a book, I was going to bring it and then I forgot to, called you know what? Let me get it. I need to get it because it's important. It gives a language. I'll be right
Okay.
back. Hold me for a second. Unfortunately, at my age, words fall out of my head. And I can get them back, I can use them. But anyway, the book is called The Secular Paradox. It was actually, I was steered onto it by a philosopher, Aaron Rasmussen, and it really helps with the language of non-belief and the dynamics of non-belief. It's very complex, really complex, the dance that non-believers do. And sure, in one sense, I'm totally a humanist. Desiderius Erasmus was a humanist, and he was a devout Catholic.
Mhm.
That in that sense, humanism has nothing to do with religious belief. But my saying I'm not a humanist is related to the again to the school of the cultural humanism that I found within Unitarian Universalism. It's not wanting to be attached to that. To me, that word's weighted in our circle, especially with old guys my age.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I don't use it. Let's just call me an atheist. But sure, in the sense you're talking about, you bet I'm a humanist. I don't think you could stand being you if you weren't, and then whether you believe, no matter what you believe or don't believe.
Right.
So it's it's complicated.
It's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, so you said that Unitarian Universalism gave you the space to evolve, and that was a gift. And then you've talked a little bit about the cultural piece, which sounds like the place where you sort of rubbed up against Unitarian Universalism. Um, are there ways that you felt dissonance, discrimination, when you come out as an atheist? Um, has have you
Well,
experienced pushback or tension or anything that you've had to deal with?
not within the church. I mean, atheism is a very comfortable place to be within Unitarian Universalism. In the Columbus community, it's schizophrenic. It's the world headquarters for Cummins Diesel. So
Mhm.
it's actually quite cosmopolitan in some ways, but it's also Missouri Synod Lutheran country. And there's a lot of religious fundamentalism there. And in the community, I know there were different times I'd be introduced to a minister from a church, and as soon as they found out I was they wouldn't even talk to me. I mean, the more than once where it was just conversation stopped, the guy turned on his heel and walked off.
Wow.
And that happened more than once. Within UUism, no. And that was the cool thing about it is I was invited to evolve and I could evolve. I could push the boundaries wherever I felt they needed to push the boundaries, push my own boundaries in whatever direction seemed most growthful at the time, and people were, you'd get people go, yay. So it was a supporting community in that way. Part of my task, because there was a core uh, atheist element who also were not necessarily willing to say they were atheist anywhere outside the church. Again, in Columbus, Indiana, it was a little risky to say that.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, my economy is not tied to the local economy, and I'm an introvert, so it was not that bad for me. But if you were, say, a person who moved in Columbus social circles, one of my favorite people at the Columbus congregation, she said she was pretty careful about it, in public. I thought part of my job as minister, I mean, I went in thinking I was a mystic because I'd studied Zen. I worked in Korea for a while, and I'd studied Zen and learned a lot from it and very influenced by it. But I found I was less a mystic than an atheist, sort of a mystic atheist. But I did feel compelled to try to make room for the for the various forms of spiritualism, including Christianity in the church, because we do have Christian members. That church even had a couple of Trinitarian Christian members, which are not unheard of. Rebecca Parker, probably
Right.
better than I do. So to kind of make sure that that space was created for them to evolve, not just the folks that, of course, you're a minister too, and probably know about doing that dance that everybody needs a little space created for them to evolve, not just me.
Right. Right. Which actually leads me to my next question. Your Facebook page is Thoughts of a Gentle Atheist. What are the ways that your atheism is gentle?
Okay, that's a reaction. Uh, it
Or
was
how has it become gentle too,
Yeah. Well, let me express it this way. You're probably familiar with the term new atheist.
Mhm.
Richard Dawkins and
Right.
Christopher Hitchens and that crowd. And I like reading a lot of what they do. I mean, Scientific American is one of my just very favorite religious magazines. There's a
Mhm.
lot of insights in there. But I'm not mad at anybody. And what I mean by gentle atheist is that I am perfectly fine if the person in front of me is a theistic Christian. I'm I may well back up a little bit. Uh, it's not about what they believe. It's about how does that belief play out in the world.
Right.
That certainly there are some forms of Christianity I think are unhealthy. There are some forms of atheism I'm not too sure about. Uh, but okay, Kenneth Miller, he's a biologist. He wrote a standard high school text in biology. Uh, and he also wrote a book about looking at evolution from the viewpoint of a devout Catholic, which he is. And I'm fine with that. And we actually exchanged letters a little bit about biblical hermeneutics and could have a great conversation. I'm not going to dismiss him because he's Roman Catholic, because he's this brilliant guy and he knows his biology. He was one of the plaintiff's witnesses in the Kitzmiller versus that school board in Pennsylvania lawsuit about evolution. Uh, that let us not be distracted by what you believe or what I don't believe. But let's talk about what's really important. And what the reason I say that is he caught a lot of flack from Richard Dawkins, who was just offended by his presence because he
Mhm.
was Catholic. And yet, sorry, this guy's one of the good guys. Give him a break. So when I say gentle atheism, let somebody be who they are. If they're up in the night on some social policy, that's one thing. If they hate transgender folks, we need to have a little conversation.
Right.
Uh, but if they love everybody and love Jesus while they're at it, good on them. So that's what I mean by gentle. Is okay. I am not going to define my goodness by somebody else's badness. okay, that my atheism is good for me, not because Christianity's awful, but because it's good for me.
Yeah. It's funny. I don't think we've met in real life, but I have identified as a gentle theist for my entire 25-year career.
Yeah. Well, I actually did a sermon about it, and when I was trying, okay, because I was trying to say, okay, there's another way of being an atheist other than what the quote, quote, new atheists are saying, which is, all religion is stupid and religious people are insane and all this sort of thing. Well, wait a minute. Religion isn't necessarily stupid. Religion is a way of being in the world. It's a way of relating to the world around us and the world beyond us and one another. It has nothing to do with that. Doesn't have to have anything to do with what we believe or don't believe. So my gentle atheism wasn't nearly as much about the atheism as it was trying to be about the gentle.
Lovely. Do you have any other last thoughts or perspectives or stories you want to share?
Uh, well, geez, I don't know. I guess not. Uh, uh, you've asked good questions, and I hope I've provided more or less coherent answers. Oh, let me plug my book. Uh, if you want, in fact, if you want my take on spirituality, which is a term I use on about page 5 here, it's called Reflections. In fact, it goes through Idaho. Quite a large part of it is on the Snake River Plain.
Oh, wow.
And it's reflections on time, culture, and spirits in America. It asks the question, and we're getting there, baby. It asks the question, what are we going to do when the indigenous Native American past becomes the Euro-American future? And we're getting there. Uh, and the reason I'm holding it up, it was recognized by Writer's Digest as one of the best ebooks, self-published ebooks of the last 5 years. So I've sold a grand total of maybe 100 copies, but it's a good book. So let me plug that. And you'll know everything about what I think about religion by the time you finish this. And thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Actually, I almost wound up in Palouse. I don't know, because I was taking my Servetus, the Radical Reform musical, and I wound up taking it to Idaho Falls and Boise.
Uh-huh.
And I can't remember. And then I was supposed to go up to Missoula. And I guess I never emailed you, did I? And suggested doing it. Well, apologies for that, because probably because it just the way the dates were running, my voice needed time to recover,
Mhm.
and there wouldn't have been a way to do it between Boise and then Missoula. But it certainly occurred to me.
Yeah. Well, when were you doing that?
That was last fall.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I've been here for 12 years, so I would have been here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm guessing that was probably the reason. That was part of the schedule got jammed pretty full.
Hmm.
And,
Well, if you're ever in this neck of the woods, you let me know. This is a this is a really great congregation, and we just finished a big
okay.
building project. So we've got a beautiful hybrid space, and
You're just over the border from Spokane, aren't you?
no,
Or
just over the border from Washington, from Pullman.
Pullman. Yeah, Pullman. That's what I was thinking. And then, okay, but you're quite a way down the road from Coeur d'Alene, right?
Yeah, so it's about an hour and 45 minutes to Coeur d'Alene,
Okay.
um, just under 2 hours to Spokane.
Well, if
Um,
you would like to see Servetus, which church was it? Denise Colley's church, Countryside UU Church in Palatine. They've got it on the web.
mhm.
Want to see what I do with that. Uh, or well, anyway, so whatever.
I'll check it out. I'll check it out. Like I said, if you're in this neck of the woods again, let me know.
The- yeah, the reason I say that is I have family in Salt Lake City,
Hmm.
you're not that far up the road from Salt Lake City to where it would be impossible to make a visit sometime if I'm ever back out there. I'm getting so old. I'm in my 70s. One doesn't know when one's trip is the final trip to an area at this age.
Yeah.
Probably not, though. Probably I will be back in that neighborhood.
Yeah, well, if you're around, you let me know.
Okay. All righty. Good luck with your service.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You
Take
bet.
care.